high school, I decided to go the route of going to music school. So I went to university and studied jazz piano. And then from there, I moved from Nova Scotia to Winnipeg and played music for a year and decided I really wanted to learn more, in a postgraduate or in a graduate kind of program. So I moved to Texas and I studied composition with kind of a focus on electronic music and arranging. And so I kind of built my skills as an arranger, but I wasn't songwriting at all. I just was basically making weirdo electronic pieces, like sound art kind of pieces. And then I moved, finished my program and moved to Toronto. And I knew a couple of people there and started discovering that it was really difficult for me to find people to play my weirdo electronic spacey sound art pieces. And so I started writing songs just to be creative at home. And that songwriting thing kind of snowballed into a career as a songwriter, which I never anticipated that it would. I always thought I would be more of an academic kind of composer. But I just fell in love with writing and singing and playing piano and doing all those things at once. And so that was kind of the first kind of foray into the career that I have now, was this kind of leap from academic music into kind of more commercial music. And I moved home to Nova Scotia from Toronto and decided to make my first album, and I applied for a grant to do it, and I got the grant and made this little EP collection of songs. And that was kind of the first milestone, because CBC heard that first recording and invited me to make my first album at their studio, at Studio H in Halifax, which kind of made the careers of a lot of East Coast artists like Jill Barber and Rose Cousins and Jen Grant. Like, they all made their first kind of full-length album there. And that is kind of how I got in. And then after that record, just kind of started making my own records. And this kind of experience that I had in the electronic music world in school kind of informed my ability as a producer, I guess. So those were kind of the biggest moments of decision-making moments. Yeah. I think that the academic side has given me the language to be able to speak with other musicians. Especially other musicians that have an academic background. So that, and especially as a woman you can kind of feel silenced in this business sometimes, or that your opinion or your voice doesn't matter. And being able to have that kind of academic articulation validated me in some of those spaces that maybe I may have felt a little bit silenced. So it gave me a vocabulary. And as a producer, it's kind of given me the ears to be able to hear stuff and very quickly be able to comment and make decisions about melodic lines or harmonic content or those kinds of decisions. But also, in a way, as a songwriter, in the beginning especially, I think that it held me back with this idea of perfection, and that I felt like I really wanted something to be perfect because of this academic training. And that I really needed to push through and get to the other side and kind of find the emotive space of making music. And so working with musicians that don't have that academic background, who are really relying on the emotive way of playing, has really helped balance me, I think, in terms of the academic kind of background, and then working in this kind of more emotive and visceral space as a musician, you know? Well, my very first record was an EP that I made and released in 2007. And it was kind of a collection. When I moved from Toronto, I moved to the woods of Cape Breton, like literally nobody around. And so I was writing these songs as a way of being creative when I had no other musicians around me to collaborate with. And so this first record, I never thought that I would turn into a songwriter. I never thought that I would go out touring as a musician. I just kind of made this little piece of art that kind of soothed me in a way. And then that's kind of snowballed into the next record through CBC, and then kind of taking this risk on producing my own stuff. And I mean, the very first record was a very diverse collection of songs where I thought, this has to be my opus, this is the only thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to do and show all the different kinds of things that I can do in case I never get to do this again. And so I'm really proud of it. And when I listen back, I think, oh, that was kind of pretty good. That was a good little snapshot of a moment in my life. But now as I make records, I'm not so worried about kind of summing up everything that I can do in one record, that I try and make this collection of songs that fit well together, and think about the album as a whole. And so that kind of perspective has changed in, 15 years that I've been releasing records. I think that I've always been interested in producing, but I didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't know what it was called. And so I always have had this interest in arranging and how pieces of the puzzle are kind of put together. And I mean, that's the program that I studied when I went to Texas, was composition. I really was interested in sound and how to edit and arrange and affect sound. And so I've always been doing it, but I don't think I knew what the role of a producer was in making albums. And I think that wasn't until I was in my 30s. Like, I didn't make my first album until I was 30 years old. So it took a long time for me to have the confidence to feel like I had a voice worth listening to. And part of that came from this kind of academic upbringing that kind of fostered this idea of perfection. And so I think I felt really crippled by that. But when that first album came out, it sort of opened this floodgate of wanting to kind of experiment and try as many different things as possible. And after I released a few albums, people started to ask me my opinions of their songs and to help them do it. And then I started to produce other people. And now I do that, right now, full time. I think that as instrumentalists, and especially academic instrumentalists, we can get into this tunnel vision of technique and kind of perfecting technique, where the expression of that technique, either on stage or in recording, becomes very important to us because we want to be validated for the work that we've done. But it's really, I think, important, especially when playing with a group of musicians, that we recognize that taste and emotion becomes more important than technique. And that it's really important to know that sometimes just playing the root for 16 bars is the more tasteful and emotive thing for the song than it is to whip out your Phrygian modes all over the place, But I think that is something that I battled with, especially at the beginning, and in terms of my songwriting as well, that I want to have as many chords and, harmonic, reimaginings of different progressions and to prove something, and that no one sits and listens to a record and goes, wow, that really proved that they were great. They sit and go, that really moved me. Or the music that I love really moves me. And the flaws in a lot of that music are some of the things that you remember. Like the moment that I can think of is Mary Clayton's background vocal in Gimme Shelter, when her vocal completely cracks and her voice breaks. If someone was looking for perfection, they would have said, oh, do that again. We don't want you to have this kind of vocal flaw. But that is the most emotive part of that song that is so incredible and that I remember. So these kind of things that we view as flaws when we're kind of focused on technique, those can be the most human elements of stuff that people latch onto. I would say be prepared, have a vision for what you want it to sound like. If you're working with a producer or an engineer, communicate that in a way that is understandable. So if it means finding some kind of reference material that can help with the sound that you're going for, but more importantly, be really prepared for moments of beautiful synchronicity. That you can plan something very, very well, and you can arrange something very, very detailed, but that you can be missing the moments of spontaneity if you don't allow the musicians to be themselves. So there are moments when I'm producing where I think that I'm going in to make this kind of a record, but then in giving a little bit of freedom to the musicians to be themselves, come out with something way better than I ever would have expected, because you allow them to invest a piece of who they are in the music. And so preparedness and flexibility, those would be the two things. I think that there are some technical challenges to recording a record that maybe some people who have not been in the studio a lot can feel intimidated by. So wearing headphones and listening to the other musicians through those headphones, so that being prepared for that kind of challenge and not letting it squash you emotionally. As soon as you feel kind of squashed emotionally, then the freedom is gone and you're not playing really well. So be able to articulate what you need in order to give the best performance. Some other surprising things, something like we talked about the last time, which is be prepared for these beautiful synchronicities to happen and allow them to happen. And so the other thing that I would say is, if you are producing, or if you are the leader of the band, or if you're the person communicating the idea, be flexible that the best idea wins, and it doesn't have to be yours. And so that is the biggest lesson I think I've learned as I've gotten older, that the tighter you hold on to the vision and the idea, the more you can squash the creativity. So be open for the best idea to win. I think that a lot of younger musicians are dealing with the element of social media that I did not have to deal with in the beginning. And so people, I think now, are really worried more about the branding of themselves or the images that they're projecting or the content that they're creating, and they're putting that before the art. And so you end up creating this image of oneself that is not necessarily reflected in the music that you are making. And so I would always put the art and the music first, and then create the image and reflect that in the way you present yourself to the world. Yeah, I mean, I think putting yourself out there can look very different for different people. And so this idea of measuring up to the content creation of someone else, or doing the same kind of content, like find a way to do that feels fun and truthful and reflects who you are, and that if all of your energy is going into the building of a facade, then that's just what it's going to be. It's going to be so easy for that glass house to break. And so find a way to allow that content creation to be a reflection of the art that you're making, so that it does not feel like work. And once it feels like work, or once it feels like just kind of going through the motions, people can tell, and it doesn't feel true. And so just only put out the stuff that you feel really good about, you know? I think that it might be a different sacrifice for women than for men. But as a whole, I think that you should be prepared for it to consume your life. And that can be a good thing, and that can be a bad thing. I mean, as long as the thing that you are doing is bringing you so much joy. And so having your hand in a few different things, like if you are a musician that is planning to have a career as a side musician, you should build skills to be able to work and have an income when you are not touring, or when you are not recording. So what does that look like, and how does that bring you joy in other elements of the industry? And if that's teaching, or if it's learning to make little videos that you love making, like how can you build a career that is bringing you a lot of joy in a way that doesn't feel like it is sucking your soul. I think that having access to a bunch of other musicians who are similarly in your position and can relate to that is so important, because especially all the stuff that goes on social media, we're highlighting all the good things, but it's important to be able to talk about the rough times with other people so that you can feel like you're not alone in this situation. I mean, especially as in the producing kind of world where you are kind of hunkered down by yourself a lot of times, it's really important to reach out. And I have access to this great group of women that I meet with every couple of weeks to just chat about what's going on. A lot of them have made decisions not to have children. Many of them have children, and talking about how that affects us as women is a really important conversation to be able to have. I made the choice not to have children, to have a career, and there are moments and times that I regret that. But I also see the challenges of my friends with children, and they have moments where they're like, I wish someone would take this child away from me, But I think that's a general feeling for most moms. That happens a lot. But, there's a different level of sacrifice, I think, for women as a musician in this industry than it is for men. So find your community of other women, find your community of other, producers, other bass players, be able to talk about the challenges and share knowledge. Don't hold that knowledge tight and keep it for yourself. It's not doing you any good just by yourself. No one gets ahead by squashing other people down. So share it, I would say. I would say there's two things that will make or break you, I think, in terms of having a long-term career in music. The first is to be easy to work with. Be accommodating, be kind. It doesn't mean that you have to be a pushover, but be pleasant to be around, be accommodating, be excited about all of the stuff that you're doing. And that will get you more work. And secondly, I would say be curious. Stay curious all the time, because that curiosity is going to lead to excitement of learning new things. And the more you can learn, the more you can diversify, and the more opportunities you're going to have. So if you view yourself in a tunnel vision way as I am a country musician and that's all I do, then you've narrowed the span of the work that you can get by being myopic in your view. And so be curious, like, how can I learn these hip hop bass lines? Or how can I, keep it open and curious about all opportunities. And that's going to enable you to be able to have a longer career.